Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, there is a very good chance you are a master's student at Dow University of Health Sciences. And you're probably feeling a very specific kind of anxiety.
Oh, definitely. The kind of anxiety that keeps you up at 3 a.m.
Exactly. I mean, you've got the passion. You have this research idea that you know is going to make a real difference in the medical field. But standing between you and actually doing the work is this massive, intimidating mountain.
The research synopsis.
It just looms over everything. And I think for a lot of you, it just feels like paperwork. Just a series of administrative hoops to jump through, forms to fill out, boxes to check.
Yeah, that's the trap.
Right. But we've been going through the source material for today's deep dive, the official DUHS Master's Thesis and Project Synopsis Writing Guidelines, and it's so clear that treating this like just paperwork is your first major mistake.
It's fatal to the project. Honestly, if you can just shift your mindset before you even open a blank Word document, the whole process gets easier. You have to stop thinking of this as a homework assignment, it's a contract, or even better, think of it as a blueprint.
A blueprint? I like that.
Yeah, imagine you're trying to build a house. If your blueprint is missing a load-bearing wall, or if you haven't calculated exactly how much cement you need for the foundation,
the city planner isn't going to let you break ground.
Exactly. They won't issue the permit. In this scenario, the DUHS Scientific Committee, they are the city planner. They aren't trying to be difficult just to ruin your week. They are trying to ensure your research house doesn't collapse halfway through construction.
That makes a lot of sense, because if the blueprint is shaky, the whole building falls down. So our mission today is to deconstruct this blueprint for you. We're going to take these DUHS guidelines, which, let's be honest, they look pretty dry on the page.
Very dense.
Very dense. And we're going to turn them into a strategic survival guide. We want to move past just the font sizes and margin rules. Though please, follow the margin rules.
Do not ignore the margin rules.
Right, but we want to get into the strategic logic of the document, the hidden mechanics of what the committee is actually looking for.
That's the key. We need to look at the philosophical why in Chapter 1 and then contrast that with the hyper-specific how in Chapter 2. And we definitely need to flag the major traps that get these synopses rejected.
Let's start with the big picture then. The guidelines split the synopsis into two main heavy hitters. You've got Chapter 1, the introduction, and Chapter 2, the methodology. Let's look at Chapter 1 first. There are a lot of subsections listed here: background, literature review, rationale, statement of problem.
It's a lot.
It is. And when you're staring at a blank screen, it's really easy to feel like all of these sections are just asking for the exact same information.
Oh, they will absolutely bleed together if you aren't careful. I've seen so many drafts where the rationale just repeats the background and then the problem statement just repeats the rationale. The best way to visualize Chapter 1 is as a funnel.
Okay, a funnel. Walk us through that.
So you start wide at the top, completely descriptive, very broad, and then paragraph by paragraph, you narrow it down until you hit a single sharp point at the very bottom.
Let's look at the wide end of that funnel first. Section 1.1, the background. The guidelines limit this to about 1 page, so roughly 3 to 4 paragraphs. What is the strategic goal here?
This is your landscape shot. At this stage, you aren't even arguing for your specific study yet. You are just establishing the magnitude of the problem.
So setting the scene.
Right. Let's say you were studying diabetes. This is where you talk about diabetes as a global burden or a massive societal issue. What is the disease? What is its general impact on public health? It's the "you are here" marker on the map. You're setting the stage. You aren't acting at the play yet.
Broad strokes. Diabetes is a major health issue affecting millions globally, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But then you move down the funnel to section 1.2, which is the literature review. And looking at the text, the DUHS guidelines get extremely prescriptive about the choreography here. You cannot just dump a random list of abstracts you found on PubMed.
Yeah, the text is very clear on that. This seems like a major rejection point.
It's probably the most common one for Chapter 1. The guidelines explicitly demand a geographic sequence. You must arrange your findings in a specific order. You start with international findings, then you move down to regional findings, and finally you end with local findings.
That is incredibly specific. So if I find this amazing, groundbreaking study from Karachi that perfectly aligns with my topic, I can't just open my literature review with it.
You cannot, because science is deeply contextual. You need to show the committee that you understand the global baseline first. What does the data look like in Europe or the US? Then how does that picture shift when you look at the broader region, say South Asia or the Middle East?
And then you drill down.
Yes. Then finally, you drill it down to the local context, Sindh or Karachi or wherever your specific setting is.
It's almost like zooming in on Google Earth. You start with the world, then the continent, then the city.
That's a great analogy. It proves to the committee that you've done the homework at every single level. And critically, the text mentions that you need to cite articles that have objectives similar to your own. You are building a case that says, look, I know what the world already knows about this specific topic.
And how long should this be?
The section should be about 2 pages, roughly, maybe 3 paragraphs per page, depending on how dense your analysis is.
Okay, so we've gone from the broad background to the geographically structured literature funnel. We know what the world knows. Now we hit section 1.3, the rationale. I feel like this is where a lot of students just hit a wall. If I've just written a 2-page lit review, haven't I already explained why my topic matters?
And that is the exact trap. The literature review tells the committee what we do know. The rationale is explicitly for what we do not know. This is the gap.
The gap, capital G.
Capital G. You need to identify the missing piece of the puzzle. You've just spent pages saying, we know X, Y, and Z regarding this disease. The rationale is where you pivot. You say, however, we don't know A. Or, we don't know how X applies to the specific demographic in rural Sindh.
So the rationale is essentially the sales pitch for the project.
It is 100% a sales pitch. You are justifying the very existence of your project by pointing at that empty, unexplored space in the research and saying, I'm going to fill that space. If you can't clearly articulate the gap, you don't actually have a rationale, you just have a summary.
That distinction is so crucial for you to hear. It's the difference between writing a book report and writing a scientific research proposal. Now, speaking of crucial distinctions, we arrive at what I genuinely think is the most dangerous section in Chapter 1, Section 1.4, the statement of problem.
I love that you call it dangerous because the DUHS guidelines literally print a bold warning here. It actually says, this should not be a repetition of your introduction or literature review.
Which implies that historically, almost everyone just repeats their introduction there.
All the time. Students get to this section and they think, okay, I need to state the problem again for emphasis. So they write another paragraph about how devastating the disease is. But the requirement from DUHS is incredibly strict. The statement of problem must be a single sentence.
Wait, just one sentence?
One single sentence, declarative or inquisitive. That is it.
That sounds incredibly difficult, especially if you've been deep in the weeds of your research for months. You want to explain all the nuances.
It is difficult, but it forces clarity. If you cannot strip your entire research project down to one single sentence, you probably don't actually know what you're asking. The example they provide in the text is perfect. It just reads, what is the burden of tuberculosis in rural Sindh?
That's the whole thing. What is the burden of tuberculosis in rural Sindh?
That's it. No commas, no semicolons, no backstory about when TB was first discovered. It completely cuts through the noise. It is the absolute core question your entire thesis is designed to answer.
So if you are listening to this right now and your statement of problem is a paragraph long,
delete it. Start over. Get it down to one sentence.
Okay, so that covers the philosophy of Chapter 1. We've funneled down from the global background to the specific local gap, and we've sharpened everything into a single sentence problem. Now, we pivot to the execution side. The guidelines briefly list objectives and hypotheses, which are fairly standard, but then we hit Section 1.7, operational definitions.
Yes. The great stumbling block.
To the uninitiated, this just sounds like you grab a medical dictionary. If my study is about hemoglobin, I just write down the definition of hemoglobin, right?
And if you do that, you will fail your synopsis defense. There is a massive fundamental difference between a conceptual definition and an operational definition.
Break that down for us.
A conceptual definition just tells you what a thing is. It's the dictionary entry. Hemoglobin is a protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen. Great, that's true. But an operational definition tells the committee how you are going to measure it in this specific study. It is the bridge between the abstract medical idea and the hard, quantifiable data.
The text actually gives a really granular example for total hemoglobin. I want to walk through that because it highlights the exact level of detail the committee wants.
It's the perfect illustration to use. It starts with the standard conceptual definition we just mentioned, but then it adds expressed in G100 milliliter or GDL. So right off the bat, you have to state the exact unit of measurement.
Right, getting specific.
And then, and this is the real kicker, it says, this will be measured using Stago STA Compact Max Hematology Analyzer.
They want you to name the specific machine.
They want the machine, the specific model, the exact method. Why? Because high hemoglobin might mean something slightly different on a different machine or with a different calibration standard. If you don't specify the exact tool you're using, your data isn't reproducible. An operational definition isn't an explanation, it's a recipe.
That is a fantastic way to put it. It's the difference between saying, I'm going to bake a cake, and I'm going to bake a cake using 2 cups of sifted flour at 350 degrees for exactly 40 minutes.
Exactly. One is just an intention, the other is a strict protocol. And that is actually a perfect segue into Chapter 2, the methodology, because if Chapter 1 was the philosophical why, Chapter 2 is the technical manual for the how.
This is where the rubber really meets the road.
This is the instruction manual. And the standard for this chapter is actually very simple to grasp. If you handed your Chapter 2 to another researcher and then you walked out of the room, they should be able to conduct your study exactly as you would have without asking you a single clarifying question. It needs to be that precise.
Let's talk about the math then, because Section 2.5, sample size, seems to cause a ton of anxiety. I think a lot of students just want to pick a number that sounds robust. I'll survey 100 people. 100 sounds like a solid number.
Absolutely not. That is the quickest way to get your synopsis kicked back to you. The guidelines are entirely rigid here. You cannot guess. You have to show your math.
So what does showing your work look like in a DUHS synopsis?
The guidelines explicitly state you need to mention which software was used to calculate that number. Was it OpenEpi? Was it the WHO sample size calculator? You have to name the digital tool. Then you need to state the confidence level. Usually that's 95%, but you have to actually write it down in the document.
And you need a reference citation just for the calculation.
Right. Yes, and this is what trips people up all the time. You have to cite the specific published article or prevalence study that provided the baseline data you plugged into that calculator. You can't just write prevalence is 10%. You have to write prevalence is 10% based on the study by Smith et al. From 2024. The committee needs absolute proof that your sample size is based on statistical power and previous evidence, not just convenience.
Okay, so we have the raw number of people. We know we need, let's say, 384 participants based on the software calculation. Now we need to define who they are and how we actually get them. This brings us to a really important distinction in the text between Section 2.4, study population, and Section 2.6, sampling technique.
Right, and these two get confused constantly by students. Think of study population as the who. The guidelines actually want this formatted with bullet points. Literally, use bullet points. You need a list for inclusion criteria and a list for exclusion criteria.
Inclusion makes sense to me. Who do we want in the study? But exclusion is interesting. It's not just the people who don't fit the inclusion criteria, is it?
No, and that's a highly nuanced point that the committee looks for. Exclusion criteria are specifically for people who do meet the inclusion criteria, but they need to be removed from the study for confounding reasons.
Like what?
Maybe they have a comorbidity that would skew the data. Or maybe they are on a specific medication that interferes with the lab test you're running. You have to list those exact reasons clearly.
Okay, so that's the who. Then we move to Section 2.6, sampling technique, which is the how.
Correct. This is the procedure. You can't just write random sampling and move on to the next section. That's far too vague. You need to specify the exact technique. Is it multi-stage cluster sampling? Is it systematic random sampling?
And then you have to explain the actual physical logistics of it.
Just how is that sample physically drawn? Are you going door to door in a specific union council? Are you picking every third patient that walks through the doors of the OPD? It's the logistical steps of selection. The committee needs to see the actual mechanism you're using.
Which flows perfectly right into Section 2.7, the data collection procedure. The guidelines call for a detailed procedure here.
I like to call this the script of the movie. You need to outline the entire narrative of the interaction. The text actually lists specific questions you have to answer in this section. How will participants be approached? And by whom?
Does the by whom really matter that much?
It matters a huge amount to the ethics committee. Is the principal investigator approaching them? Is it a hired research assistant? Is it the attending nurse? And then exactly how is the study explained to the patient? How is informed consent actually obtained?
So it really is a step-by-step walkthrough.
Yeah.
I walk into the room, I explain the parameters of the study, they sign the consent form, the nurse draws the blood.
Exactly. If you leave any ambiguity here, the ethics committee gets very nervous. They need to see that you've deeply thought through the human interaction part of your study, not just the raw data points. They have to know that the rights, the privacy, and the safety of the participants are completely baked into your process.
Wow. Okay, let's zoom out to the logistics now, the project management side of things. Because A research project doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the real world where your time and your money are very finite resources. Section 2.9 is the study timeline.
And here, the DUHS guidelines have a very specific mandated preference, the Gantt chart.
The Gantt chart. Essential for anyone trying to manage any kind of complex project, really.
It's the only way to visualize reality. You map out the months and columns, month 1 to 6 or 1 to 12, depending on your program. Then the rows are your actual activities. Synopsis writing, ethics approval, data collection, data processing, thesis writing.
Why is the committee so insistent on seeing a Gantt chart?
Because it forces the student to be realistic. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen students claim they will collect data from 500 patients, analyze all of it in SPSS, and write the entire thesis draft all in month 4.
Which is impossible.
Completely impossible. The Gantt chart visually shows you that it's impossible. It proves to the committee that you actually have a mature, realistic sense of time management.
And then there's the realistic sense of money. Section 2.10, the budget.
Be practical is the exact advice printed in the text. You need to list everything. The cost of lab tests, printing the questionnaires, stationary transport. But my absolute favorite part of the budget section, and the part that saves students the most headaches down the road, is the explicit instruction to always leave some room for unforeseen expenditures.
The rainy day fund.
The rainy day fund. Because in field research, something always breaks. A machine goes down and you have to pay out of pocket for repairs. Printing costs suddenly go up. Travel becomes more expensive because fuel prices spike mid-study. If your proposed budget is tight to the exact penny, you are setting yourself up for a crisis. The committee wants to see that financial buffer. It shows foresight.
It's a sign that you know things don't always go to plan. Finally, we have the references section.
Vancouver style.
Right, Vancouver style. No APA, no MLA. Do not mix them up.
Vancouver is the absolute gold standard for medical research, and the guidelines strongly suggest using reference management software, like EndNote.
I mean, if you were doing manual references in 2026, you are just hurting yourself.
You are wasting incredibly valuable time. Imagine having to manually renumber 50 different citations just because your supervisor told you to add one new paragraph to your introduction. Use the software. It handles all the formatting so you can actually focus on the science.
And we shouldn't forget the appendices at the very end.
Right. Your data collection forms, your questionnaires, your informed consent forms, and usually those consent forms need to be provided in both English and Urdu. All of that documentation goes at the very end of the synopsis.
So looking back at this entire deep dive, we've really taken what looks like a dry set of formatting rules and turned it into a pretty cohesive project strategy.
We really have. We've seen the funnel structure of Chapter 1, moving from the broad global context down to the regional and finally to the local data. We've identified how to pinpoint the gap in the rationale.
We've learned that the statement of problem is a single sentence, no exceptions.
Just one sentence.
We've learned that operational definitions are detailed recipes with units and specific equipment models, not just dictionary entries.
And we saw that the methodology in Chapter 2 is a strict instruction manual designed entirely for reproducibility. It honestly feels much more manageable when you break the document down like that.
It really does. It transforms the whole process from bureaucratic box checking to actual project planning.
Absolutely. And if I can leave the listener with one final thought today.
Please do.
There is a page at the very beginning of the DUHS guidelines that we skipped over earlier, but I actually think it's the most important page in the entire document. It's the certificate page.
The one requiring all the physical signatures.
Yes. It requires the signature of the researcher, that's you and your supervisor. To most students, it looks like a mere formality. Just another piece of paper to print and sign. But I want you to look at it differently. It is a professional agreement.
How so?
When you sign that page and your supervisor countersigns it, you are making a formal commitment. That single sentence statement of problem we talked about, that becomes your promise to the scientific community. You are promising to find the answer to that specific question. And your methodology chapter is your blueprint for how you plan to keep that promise. This isn't just a homework assignment to get a master's degree. It is the first real step in your career as a scientist contributing to human knowledge. You need to treat the document with that level of respect.
That is a really powerful place to leave it. It's ultimately about professional integrity.
It is.
So to all the master's students listening right now, open up your draft. Do it right now. Check your statement of problem. Is it one sentence? Check your sample size calculation. Do you have the specific software and the citation listed?
And check those operational definitions. Make sure you listed the exact machine you are going to use.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Good luck with your synopsis defense, and we'll see you next time.